Nah. My name is Rachel Navarro. I am 31 years old, and my mother removed me from the family group chat on the Tuesday afternoon while I was eating lunch at my desk. Not a phone call. Not a conversation. A group chat removal. I found out because my coworker asked me something about a Slack notification, and I glanced at my phone and saw the little gray text that said, "You were removed from family home updates." I read it 4 times. Then I put my phone face down, finished my sandwich, and opened my laptop. I want you to understand something about that moment. I was not crying, I was not shaking, I was calculating. Because I had been the one paying the homeowner's insurance on that house since 2021. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. Have you ever looked around a room you helped build and realized your name was not on any of the walls? Tell me where you are watching from right now. I want to know how far this reaches. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in a house that always felt slightly too small for the expectations inside it. My mother, Diane, was the kind of woman who kept a running tally of what she gave people and a very selective memory of what she received. My father, Gerald, worked in logistics management and operated mostly as a weather vane. Whichever way the pressure came from, that was the direction he pointed. My younger brother, Derek, was the one everybody softened their voice for. He had charm the way certain people have charm. The kind that costs them nothing and costs the people around them everything. I left for Charlotte at 22 with a business administration degree and a job offer from a commercial property management firm. I was good at it. I understood leases, liability clauses, maintenance schedules, vendor contracts, the kind of paperwork that keeps the lights on in buildings where other people do more visible work. Within 4 years, I was managing a portfolio of 14 mid-size commercial properties across 2 counties. The same competence that made me good at my job made me the person my family called when something needed untangling. When my father's truck transmission blew out and they could not afford the repair, I covered it. When my mother decided the kitchen needed updating before she hosted Thanksgiving, I handled the contractor quotes and paid the difference between what she budgeted and what things actually cost. When Derek got a DUI in 2020 and needed an attorney, I found one, negotiated the retainer, and transferred the money with a note that said, "Get it together," and a phone call he never fully returned. I did not do these things because I was asked to every time. Half the time I did them because I saw the problem forming before anyone else admitted it was there, and I could not stand watching something fixable become a crisis. That was the habit they learned to rely on. In early 2022, my parents started talking about buying a house outside Durham. Something with a little land, a back porch, room for a garden. My father was 2 years from retirement. My mother wanted to stop renting before the market moved further out of reach. The numbers did not work on their income alone. Their credit was serviceable but not strong enough for the property they had their eye on. I agreed to co-sign the mortgage. I want to be precise about this because precision is going to matter later. I did not gift them money. I co-signed, which meant my credit, my debt-to-income ratio, my financial fingerprint was on that loan. I also covered the down payment, $42,000, structured as a documented personal loan with a repayment schedule we all signed. My mother called it a formality. I called it protection. We were both right in different ways. We closed in April 2022. I drove up for the walkthrough, helped carry boxes, assembled the bed frame in the guest room that would technically be mine when I visited. Derek showed up 3 hours late with a 6-pack and a good story about traffic. By the following spring, the repayment schedule had been quietly set aside. My mother mentioned once that things were tight. I did not push. I adjusted. I kept covering the homeowner's insurance because I was on the policy and I did not trust the alternative. I absorbed the extra cost the way you absorb a lot of things in families that run on unspoken agreements. By telling yourself it is temporary and that people will remember. People do not always remember. What I did not know in the spring of 2023 was that Derek had started spending time at the Durham house. A lot of time. He had been renting a room in Greensboro with 2 other guys, and somewhere around February he had stopped paying his share and needed somewhere to land. My mother did not tell me. She mentioned he was visiting. She did not mention he had moved his gaming setup into the guest room. My room, technically. The one with the bed frame I had assembled. I found out in June when I drove up unannounced because I had a contractor meeting nearby and wanted to stay the night. Derek answered the door in pajamas at 2 in the afternoon. His stuff was everywhere. His name was on a sticky note on the refrigerator shelf where my mother had labeled everyone's food. My name was not on a shelf. My name was on the mortgage. My mother came downstairs and immediately began explaining that it was just temporary, that Derek was getting back on his feet, that there was plenty of room, that I was being rigid. I remember the word rigid specifically because it was the first time she had used it to describe me, and I could tell from the practiced way she said it that it had been used before. Just not to my face. I did not argue. I stayed one night on the couch. I drove back to Charlotte the next morning and I started paying closer attention. What I noticed over the following 4 months was a pattern I should have identified sooner. Derek was not getting back on his feet. He was installing himself. He had a parking spot. He had a key. He had started referring to the Durham house in conversations with extended family as the house in a way that suggested ownership rather than residency. A cousin mentioned at a birthday dinner that Derek had told her he was basically running things up there since my parents were getting older and needed the help. I asked my mother about this directly in September. She said Derek was just being helpful. She said I was reading too much into things. She said, and I wrote this down that evening because I had started writing things down. He's family too, Rachel. You don't have a monopoly on caring about this household. I had a monopoly on the mortgage. I did not say that. I wrote it down instead. The group chat removal happened on a Tuesday in October. No warning, no argument, no precipitating fight. I had sent a message the previous Friday asking whether the HVAC service I had scheduled for the house was still on for the following week. Nobody responded. Then Tuesday afternoon, gone. I sat with it for 45 minutes. Then I opened my laptop and started working. The first thing I did was call my insurance broker and begin the process of removing myself as the primary policyholder on the homeowner's insurance. If I was not family enough for the group chat, I was not going to be family enough to absorb the liability either. My broker flagged that this would require notifying the mortgage lender, which was fine. That was actually the point. The second thing I did was email the mortgage servicer and request a formal account review. As co-signer, I had standing to initiate this. I also asked in the same email about the process for a co-signer release, what would be required for my name to be removed from the loan. I already knew the answer. I just wanted it in writing. The third thing I did was call my accountant, Patricia, and ask her to pull together a clean summary of every documented transfer, payment, and expense I had covered related to the Durham property since 2022. Patricia had been doing my taxes for 6 years. She did not ask many questions. She said she would have something for me by end of week, and her voice had that careful neutrality that accountants use when they understand exactly what a request means. My phone rang at 6:47 that evening. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again at 7,002. Then my father at 7,015. Then a number I did not recognize at 7,031 that turned out, when I listened to the message the next morning, to be Derek calling from a friend's phone because he apparently assumed I had blocked him, which I had not yet. His message was, "Rachel, come on. It was just a chat. Mom was in a mood. Call her back. Just a chat. $42,000 and 3 years of insurance premiums, and it was just a chat." I went to bed. I slept fine. The next morning I had an email from my father that began with, "Your mother is very upset," and ended with, "I hope you're not doing anything rash." I read it twice, noted the passive construction, "your mother," not we, and did not respond. What I did instead was drive to Durham that Saturday. I had called ahead and told my father I needed 20 minutes and a table. He said okay. He always said okay. That was both his best quality and his worst one. When I walked in, my mother was in the kitchen not looking at me, which meant she had planned to be in the kitchen not looking at me. Derek was on the couch. He had not planned anything. He was just there the way he was always just there, present without intention, occupying space that other people had arranged. I put a folder on the dining table and sat down. My father sat across from me. After a moment, my mother came and stood near the doorway. Derek did not move. I opened the folder and went through it the same way I would walk a client through a lease review. No raised voice. No preamble. First document, the original loan agreement from April 2022, with my signature as cosigner, my down payment as a documented personal loan, the repayment schedule with all signatures including my mother's and my father's. Second document, Patricia summary, every transfer, every insurance payment, every contractor invoice I had covered since closing. Total $68,400 over 31 months, not counting the down payment. Third document, a printout of the mortgage servicer's email confirming my co-signer status and the conditions required for release. Fourth document, something I had found by accident 3 weeks earlier and had been sitting on. A screenshot sent to me by my cousin Alicia of a message Derek had sent to a family group I was not in, a different one, apparently, where he wrote that my parents were planning to add him to the deed eventually, and that Rachel's name on the paperwork is just a formality at this point. She's not really involved in the day-to-day. Not really involved in the day-to-day. My father looked at that last document for a long time. Long enough that the kitchen went very quiet. My mother had moved from the doorway to a chair, though I had not seen her sit down. Derek said, from the couch, that he was just venting, that it was a private message, that Alicia had no business sending that to me. I said, very quietly, that I found it interesting he was more concerned about Alicia's behavior than about the content of what he wrote. He said he had been stressed. I asked him what, specifically, he had contributed to the property that made him feel entitled to reference the deed. Silence. My mother started to say something about tension in families and how we all say things we do not mean. I slid the Patricia summary closer to the center of the table and asked her to tell me which line item she did not mean to accept. She stopped talking. My father rubbed his face with both hands. He looked older than he had at Christmas, and I noticed, the way you notice things when you are being very careful, that he did not look at Derek when he asked his next question. He looked at the table. He asked Derek, in a voice I had not heard him use since we were children, whether he had actually told people he expected to be put on the deed. Derek said it had just come up in conversation. My father asked when exactly they had discussed this, because he did not remember that conversation. Derek said Mom had mentioned it. My mother's chin came up fast. She said she had never said anything about the deed. She said she had told him to stop acting like he lived there. And then she stopped herself, because she had just confirmed, in front of all of us, that she knew he was acting like he lived there and had said so privately and had not told me. That was the moment. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just the moment when a lie that had been assembled in pieces could not hold its shape anymore, in the same room as the people who knew the parts. I did not press it. I did not need to. I let the silence do the work because silence is the most honest thing in a room where people have been very busy being dishonest. My father turned to me and asked what I needed. Not what I wanted. What I needed. It was a small distinction and I think he knew it. I told him. Derek would be off the property within 30 days, not asked, not encouraged. A written move-out date that I would have confirmed by my attorney before I drove back to Charlotte. The personal loan repayment schedule would be reinstated with automatic monthly transfers to an account I controlled, not a shared account, not a Venmo request. An automatic transfer documented. I would remain on the mortgage under revised terms, a formal agreement drafted by an attorney that gave me right of first refusal on any future changes to the deed, including additions, transfers, or any attempt to establish equitable interest through residency. And one more thing. My father would call Derek's landlord reference, not me, not my parents' shared account. If Derek needed a place to go, my father could make the call and vouch for him the way fathers vouch for sons. That was a family thing. I was not going to be the infrastructure for that. My father agreed to everything before I closed the folder. My mother did not agree right away. She asked if I was really going to make Derek leave. I said I was not making Derek do anything. I was clarifying the conditions under which I would remain financially responsible for the home she lived in. Those were two different things, and I needed her to understand the difference. She understood. She signed the acknowledgement my attorney emailed that evening. Derek left in 3 weeks, not 4. He did not say goodbye to me. He took the gaming setup, the labeled shelf space, and whatever version of the story he had already been telling people. His version, I eventually heard, through my cousin, was that I had gone cold in corporate and that money had changed me. Money had not changed me. Watching what happened when I was quiet for too long had changed me. Those are not the same thing. 3 months later, the automatic transfers started coming in on the first of every month. $1,200. It was not the full amount on the original schedule we had restructured, but it came every month without a message attached. The first time it hit my account, I was making coffee on a Sunday morning and my phone buzzed with the deposit notification, and I stood at my kitchen counter for a moment, not entirely sure what I was feeling. It was not triumph. It was closer to the feeling of finally being able to exhale after you had been holding your breath for so long you forgot that was what you were doing. My mother called more after that. Not desperate calls, regular calls. She asked about my work, complained about the neighbors, told me about a book she was reading. My father started texting me links to articles about property values in Durham and asking my opinion, which was his version of an apology and also his way of saying he respected what I knew. I answered. I was not warm the way I used to be. I was honest, which I think is more valuable. Derek called me once, about 2 months after he moved out. He was in Fayetteville by then, staying with a friend working at a sporting goods store. His voice had that quality it got when he was about to ask for something, slightly too casual, slightly too careful. He said he just wanted to check in. I said okay. He asked how things were going with the house. I said fine. He asked if Mom and Dad were doing okay. I said yes. Then there was a pause long enough that we both knew the real question was not going to get asked, and he said he guessed he would let me go. I said, take care of yourself. And I meant it. Not warmly, not coldly, just plainly. He is not called since. My attorney filed the deed amendment agreement with the county 4 months after that Saturday meeting. My name, my terms, my protections, recorded publicly the way things need to be recorded when relationships run on assumptions for too long, and then the assumptions stop working. My father texted me the day it was recorded. He sent one line, I see your name on this. It should have always looked like this. I saved that message. I did not respond right away. I sat with it for a while the way I had sat with a group chat removal, except this time I was not calculating. I was just quiet. The good kind of quiet. What I learned in 31 years and one October Tuesday is something I wish I could have understood when I was 22 and eager to be useful. Generosity that goes unnamed becomes expectation. Expectation, left alone long enough, becomes entitlement. And by the time entitlement has a key to your family's house and a labeled shelf in their refrigerator, it believes it has always lived there. I did not stop loving my parents. I stopped funding a version of family life in which my presence was financial and my absence was administrative. I come to Durham now for Sunday dinners sometimes. My mother makes the rice the way I like it. My father and I walk around the property after, and he points out things he wants to fix and asks how I would approach them. The guest room has my name on a sticky note on the door now. My mother put it there without saying anything about it. I noticed and did not say anything either. Some things do not need to be said once they are finally done correctly. The mortgage has 4 years left. My name is on it. So is the agreement that says what happens if anyone tries to change the terms without me. So is the clause that makes it very clear that no future resident acquires rights through duration, familiarity, or family feeling alone. My brother thought being present was the same as belonging. My mother thought loyalty meant absorbing everything without accounting for it. My father thought staying out of it was the same as being neutral. None of them were right. And the only reason we are still in the same orbit is because on a Tuesday afternoon in October, instead of texting back into a group chat I had been removed from, I opened a laptop and started building something that did not depend on any of them remembering to include me. I was not invited back. I restructured the terms under which I would return. That is the only version of this story that made sense to protect. I have thought a lot about what actually caused all of this, not who, what. The honest answer is that it started long before Derek moved his gaming setup into my guest room. It started the first time I solved a problem for my family without naming what it cost me. Not the money specifically, the precedent. Every time I absorbed something quietly, I was teaching everyone around me that quiet absorption was simply how I operated, that it required nothing in return, that it had no limit. I do not blame myself for being generous. But I spent years confusing generosity with invisibility, and those are not the same thing. Generosity is a choice you make with open eyes. Invisibility is what happens when you make that choice so many times and such silence that the people receiving it forget a choice was ever made at all. Diane forgot. Gerald forgot it was convenient to forget. And Derek never bothered to learn it in the first place. What I understand now, sitting on this side of it, is that actions accumulate, not in some abstract cosmic way, but in the most practical, immediate sense. Every assumption my family made about me was built on the foundation of something I had allowed. Every time Derek introduced himself as someone who ran things at a house his sister had financed, he was borrowing credibility that belonged to me and spending it on a story about himself. That kind of thing does not stay hidden. It has a weight. And eventually the weight lands somewhere. It landed on a dining room table in Durham, in the form of a folder on a Saturday afternoon when I stopped being quiet about the accounting. What I kept coming back to, in the weeks after, was this: intelligence without integrity is just a more sophisticated way of making excuses. Derek was smart enough to build a narrative. He positioned himself carefully with extended family. He knew which version of the story to tell to which person. That takes a kind of social intelligence. But he applied it entirely in service of something that was not his credit, not his sacrifice, not his $42,000, not his years of weekend calls and contractor coordination and insurance renewals. Nobody ever thanked anyone for. Intellect used to take what you have not earned is not cleverness. It is a liability dressed as an asset, and the bill always comes. What held me together in the middle of all of it was not anger. Anger would have made me loud. Loud would have made me easy to dismiss. What held me together was the habit of doing the next correct thing, even when I was the only one in the room who seemed interested in what correct looked like. I drove to Durham. I sat down. I opened the folder. I spoke in a normal voice. I waited. That is what resilience actually is, I think. Not the dramatic version where someone rises from ashes in a single moment. It is the much quieter version, doing the careful, unglamorous work of protecting yourself methodically, even when part of you would rather just leave and never come back. The sticky note my mother put on the guest room door without explanation. My name in her handwriting, just there. I noticed it and said nothing. But I felt it. And I think that small, wordless gesture was her version of the most honest thing she knew how to do. Acknowledge, without ceremony, that something had been wrong and was now, in her own limited way, being corrected. That is enough. Not everything, but enough.